Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Aero League Racing Tier 1. My name is Aman, and you all join me today for the Imola Grand Prix. Only a little while longer until we get started. We've got an exciting race planned for all of you ahead. And while we have the chance, why don't we take a look at the standings very quickly? So Mitchell currently leads the championship with 51 points, but he's not too far ahead with Elite right behind him with 43. Joel Royal currently has 37 points, lands himself in P3. BR4, meanwhile, with 30 points in P4. And Big Bambino with currently 28 points in P5. The rest of the top 10 would be Jaguar, Typos, Stel, Ella, and Steba. So the championship 3 rounds in. We're still relatively pretty close together here. Currently in the Constructors' Championship, Aston Martin lead the table with 65 points, but are followed very closely behind by Haas with 62. Ferrari currently in P3 with 55 points, then followed by Red Bull with 34, and then the Mercedes team with 28 points. And the rest of the bottom 5, we have Williams, AlphaTauri, Alpine, McLaren, and Alfa Romeo in that order. So even though we're a few races in, this championship is still definitely 100% up for grabs. But the championship battle is definitely very, very tight. So it should be exciting to see how drivers handle Imola today. And yeah, I think just a little while longer, and we should be getting started very, very soon. So until then, get yourself something to eat, maybe something to drink, grab a loved one, and yeah, we should be getting started very, very soon. Hello, Saeed. Good to see you as always. I feel like it's been a while since we've spoken. How have you been? It's nice to hear from you as well, Mitchell. Best of luck for your race, man. Hope everything goes well for you. Hopefully, you'll be able to extend that championship advantage. Even though I wasn't around for just a week. Sorry. Oh, you hate this track? Um, I'm sure that feeling is mutual around everybody, really. Imola is just one of those really shit tracks around this time, in this game. Oh, well, it's a good thing that there's only a little while left to play this game, and then we can move on to the next one, and hopefully that's better. But yeah, even though I've only been gone for like a week, it feels like so much longer. So should be good to get back into it though. We do have 17 drivers currently on the grid, or 16, I guess, excluding me. Ultimate Beast says in the chat that he's looking forward to having his debut race with ALR. Yeah, man, best of luck for you too. I can see you're in the Alfa Romeo. I'll be keeping an eye on you to see how you do throughout the entire race. I think the important thing is just stay calm. Thankfully, you're in a league, or well, in a tier where most of the drivers do know how to go side by side with each other, and they are, of course, very, very quick. But as long as you just keep those pre-race nerves cool, you're not too trigger happy, and you don't go on the gas too quick or whatever, you should be fine. So just be sure to relax, enjoy yourself. This is your debut race, no expectations, no pressure, nothing. Just go out there, drive your drive, have fun, see how you match up against everybody else, and try to get some good racing in. And I'm sure as the season progresses, you'll be, slowly, slowly improving as well. So exciting stuff. I'm not too sure how many more people we're waiting on. I think we should be getting started very, very soon now. Well, while we have the chance, why not talk about the track? So Imola, mixed opinions about this one from what I know. You either hate it or you love it. This track is, personally, I'm not really a big fan. A track that has a lot of tight, twisty sections to it. And Mitchell has given us the go-ahead that we are all set to get underway. But yes, a track where downforce is a very, very key aspect to this track. So you want to make sure that you have a high downforce setup to make sure that you can go through those fast left right handers cleanly. And you got to make sure that it's also very easy to unsettle the car here. So drivers will be looking to be on their toes, especially when trying to go side by side with each other. There isn't a ton of overtaking places, but I'm sure that if you stick your nose in, you're probably going to get some. You're probably going to be able to force the other driver into a mistake, which would allow you to take advantage of that. But regardless, ladies and gentlemen, only 15 seconds left, and we should be getting qualifying at Imola back underway. Underway, not back underway. All right then. Let's get qualifying underway as I quickly set up all the lap data so that we don't miss even the slightest bit of action. So who will be the first driver to go out on track? That is the big question. Obviously, the first car out on track will most likely be setting not an extremely rapid lap time, seeing as there's really no grip out on track and there's no rubber that's been laid out. Regardless, it should be interesting to see. It looks like we have a few clouds in the area, but it relatively seems like it's going to be an overall dry qualifying. So we can see some activity over there at the Alpine garage, and it seems to be an Alpine that's coming out first. Who will it be? That's the big question. It does seem to be... Is that Big Bambino? No, it is Steva. Okay, so Steva currently going to be the first car out on track. We can see there's two McLarens following him right behind him. But regardless, we will be riding on board with Steva as he runs us through hopefully the first time lap of Imola, and we'll get a banker as to seeing what type of pace the rest of the drivers are going to be setting for each other. So again, something very crucial to remember about this track is the fact that it is a very high downforce oriented track, and there's a ton of gravel on the outside of the track there, as you can see. So drivers have to make sure that they absolutely do not go over there, otherwise they're definitely going to lose control of their cars. I also apologize if I'm constantly clearing my throat. It is because it is a bit messed up at the moment. Probably a good idea to take a look at who's behind him. So we can see that Jackalacco and Adam currently behind Steba at the moment. There is a Williams in between them, and that happens to be, I believe, that would be Joe Royal. Yes, it is. So At the current moment, it seems Stava is going to be setting the first time lap, followed by I forget. Yeah, Stava is going to be setting the first time lap, followed by Jacko Lacko, followed by Joe, followed by Adam. So, regardless, we ride on board with the Alpine as it starts the first timed run here at Imola. Ella has thankfully joined us with DRS wide open. He sticks towards the right side, trying to minimize as much distance towards the hard braking point as possible. Heading into the chicane, very, very fast chicane, trying to ride the curves as much as possible without sacrificing too much speed. Rides the outside curve just a little bit there and approaches the second fast chicane. Now, it's super easy to unsettle the car there, especially if you drive off of the curves and into the gravel, which Staba has luckily seemed to avoid. Sets a 24.5, I believe it was, in Sector 1, so a good first sector from him. We can see a McLaren in the background, just as I was saying there. It's so easy to unsettle the car as we see a McLaren in the background spin off. Unfortunately, that must have been Jacko. Hopefully he doesn't compromise his own teammates' run. Regardless, Staba keeping a very nice tight line through that corner and progressing through this lap very, very nicely here. So it's a 50.6 in Sector 2. Hey, what's good, Nocturne? How you doing? And Staba now with only the last 2 corners on the track left to go. It is a short track around here, but it's a track where it's very easy to make mistakes and very easy to invalidate your lap times. Regardless, Staba has managed to keep it relatively clean, comes across the line, sets a 116.1, and that will be your first banker here at Imola as we go through the rest of the grid. It seems like Joe has unfortunately invalidated his lap time. Meanwhile, Adam, on the other hand, now comes across the line, sets a 116.6, which promotes him up into P2. Looking down the grid, we can see, unfortunately, Unknown Elder has invalidated his lap time. Oh, and Mitchell has completely spun his car around. So Mitchell coming into the chat and telling us how much he dislikes this track. We can see that progress right there as he's unfortunately lost his car and spun it around. Meanwhile, Miesco and Typos currently setting a 116.2 and 116.3 respectively, putting them up in P2 and P3. Pyro, on the other hand, in the AlphaTauri sets at 116.4 and landing himself in P4 at the moment. Looking down the grid, young Tug at the moment comes across the line. What time will he set? He sets a 116.0 and manages to take provisional pole away from Stava. So I believe this is his debut race, so he's doing pretty well for himself so far. Let's look down a bit of the grid. So Elite currently on his timed run. The Ultimate Beast currently on his timed run. And it doesn't look like anyone's really invalidated their lap times just as yet. We know a few drivers have had their incidents of sorts. Joe Royal, on the other hand, looks like he's on his second run. Young Thug, I have to call him that for the rest of the stream. You know what, I might as well. Young Thug is like, it's harder for me to say anyways. Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. Ooh, Unknown Elder actually getting a bit squirrely through that exit there. And BR4 managing to take provisional pole. Sets a 115.6, but Big Bambino not too far behind with a 115.9 of his own. So the Red Bull definitely showing that there is a lot more time to be gained through this lap. Meanwhile, what will Unknown Elder do here? It looks like he's a bit too slow on this occasion to maybe be setting any rapid lap times. We can see Booma currently out on the medium tires. I'm not too sure what that's all about. Meanwhile, what will Ella set for us? Ella has a 50.4 in through sector 2. No, doesn't seem like it's a rapid lap time. And we can see Booma has actually actually DNF'd from this race. So much for that. I'm guessing he was just going out for the fun of it. But Ella currently in P12 without a lap time set. What time will he be able to set for himself? And how far up will he promote himself? Comes across the line, sets a 116.1, and manages to promote himself up into P4 with a 116.1. So not bad at the moment. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the first timed runs by the drivers have been set. At the moment, BR4 sits in provisional pole with a 115.6. Big Bambino currently sitting very close behind him with a 115.9, sits in P2. We can see young Thug currently in P3 with a 116.0. Ella with a 116.1 in P4, and Stava with a 116.1 currently in P5. It does seem to be that Ella is on a run of his own at the moment. Actually, never mind. He does have blinking ERS. 57% ERS used up at the moment. I can't. No, he's definitely a lot slower in on this lap. We have a few drivers currently out for their out laps at the moment. I believe Staba may be the one who's leading the charge at the moment as well. You can see Mieszko right behind him. Actually, Mitchell's just about to begin his timed run, so unfortunately spinning out in his last timed run will most likely be trying to set a lap time at least on this occasion as he comes across the line and begins his first timed run, or his second timed run at Imola. Z Mitchell keeping it relatively clean for now. Hasn't spun the car out just as yet, but coming through this fast chicane, it's so easy to unsettle the car, especially if you go onto the gravel over there, but Mitchell managing to avoid it as such. This is where he spun the car last time around, coming through this corner once again. Oh, you can see it once again, losing the rear. So it seems like Mitchell is really struggling through that corner despite setting a purple sector 1. Luckily for him, he hasn't invalidated his lap time as we're almost halfway through sector 2. Would maybe riding on the curves there a bit more than he would have liked, but finishing up with sector 2 sets a 50.34, and that does get him the purple sector 2. Yeah, Boomer, I saw you out on the mediums. I wasn't too sure what you were doing, but yeah, it started off well. Regardless, Mitchell coming through the final two corners of this track. What time will he set? Ooh, losing the rear just a little bit more there. So Mitchell definitely struggling on this track. Comes across the line, sets a 1:15.6, and despite those struggles, it doesn't matter. Mitchell once again manages to take provisional pole away from BR4. And as I say that, it's not even a moment to take a breather, as Joe Royal now comes completely out of nowhere and stealing that away from Mitchell now with a 1:15.5. Joe Royal now sits with provisional pole. Staba currently almost 1.5 tenths up on his time with roughly 2 corners left to go. He'll need definitely a lot more than that if he's looking to take provisional pole. It doesn't look like he'll be able to. Comes across the line, sets a 1:15.6, and does manage to actually go P2. BR4 seems to be on a slow lap of his own at the moment. What about Typos? Currently sitting in P11 with a 1:16.3. Comes across the line. What time will Typos set? He manages to set a 1:16.0 and manages to promote himself up into P8 temporarily. Looks like Adam has just recently begun his timed run along with BR4. What about Pyro? Pyro currently 3.5 tenths up on his time already. Seems like he's on an absolute flyer. Let's ride on board with him as he comes through the fast left and right chicane once again. And keeps it relatively clean as there's a bit of lag to be experienced there, but oh, I'm not too sure what's going on with his lap times. It said that he was a bit up, but unfortunately now it says he's 2.5 tenths down. I'm not too sure what's going on. He has absolutely no ERS, so he may have just been going on an out lap or his in lap at the moment. The lead Spectre setting a 1:15.8, currently sitting in P6. Let's see what Mieszko can set. He's currently in the Red Bull with currently in P13 with a 1:16.2. Chasing his Red Bull teammate very, very closely. He does ride over those curves massively, but manages to avoid invalidating his lap. Boomer says, I was not qualifying legit since I feel myself as an outsider, but still this was a bit extreme. No, I understand completely. Well, it's a good thing that you retired before anybody else did. Oh, and Mieszko's actually chosen to abandon his lap, so he may have felt like there was no time to be gained on this occasion, and decides to abandon it. But meanwhile, Young Thug, currently two tenths up on his time. And I need to stop calling him that. Young Thug, currently 2 tenths up on his time, and Ella managing in the Mercedes, managing to take provisional pole away from Joe Royal by roughly 0.03 of a second, and managing to set it with a 1:15.529. So the battle for provisional pole is definitely on as we have 6.5 minutes left to go. And as we ride on board with a Haas coming through the final two corners once again. It seemed like he was on a relatively nice run. Let's see what time he'll be able to set for himself. Comes across the line, manages to set a 1:15.4, and Young Tug manages to take away provisional pole from Ella by roughly a tenth of a second. I think in the span of a few minutes, we've had multiple switches for provisional pole, so it's really up in the air as to who could possibly take it. We see the cars mostly gonna have now come back into the pits to switch on to get ready for their third and final runs, most likely. Jacko currently in P16 with a 117.2 has been struggling a little bit. It seems he may be on a run at the moment. Let's see what times he can set for himself. Comes across the first sector and is roughly 1.5 tenths up on his time. I'm not gonna keep calling him Young Thug. I can't keep doing that to him. Regardless, Jacko now coming towards the end of Sector 2. Keeps it very nice and tidy, but rides that curb a bit more than he would have liked to. Regardless, is roughly 5 tenths up on his time. So it's a very promising lap for Jacko at the moment. He's obviously been struggling a little bit since the start of the session. Give the people what they want. Young Thug for pole. Regardless, Jacko now comes across the line, sets a 1:16.5 and stays in P16, does not improve. Very unfortunate for him on this occasion. Alright, fine. We'll call him Young Thug for the rest of the race. It just makes it easier for me anyway, so I'm not complaining. You can see Pyro, Typos, and Stave are currently out on their out laps. I don't think... Oh, actually, Mitchell is on a flyer at the moment. Roughly 4 tenths up on his time. Nearly invalidated his lap there, coming through one of those final corners. Regardless, Mitchell, completely out of nowhere, comes across the line, sets a 1:15.1. And for the first time, we've seen a massive gap between P1 and P2. Roughly 3 tenths separating both the drivers as Mitchell takes provisional pole away from Young Thug. So what will the young rapper be able to set for himself as we progress through this session? We'll have to see. Typos, on the other hand, has now begun his final timed run by the looks of it. And a bunch of drivers currently still in the pits. There's still a lot of time left out on track. So there's definitely no rush to it. As you can see, Staba, I believe, now finishing up his out lap. Yeah, and as I say that, all the drivers now beginning to leave the pits. Oh, and actually, I didn't even realize Pyro's currently out into the gravel right now. It's unfortunate. It looks like he lost his car, unfortunately. And that's going to definitely damage his tires and most likely hinder his final run opportunities. Oh, and as I say that, there's an Alpine that just completely slid into frame there. I'm not too sure who that was. Was that Staba? It was Staba. So completely out. So it seems like two cars struggling on the same corner have just gone straight into the gravel there, and that will be the end for their runs most likely. Typos, we can see at the moment roughly 2 tenths up on his time coming through the final corner. And with DRS wide open, what time was he going to be able to set? Comes across the line, sets a 1:15.7 and manages to promote himself up into P8. What about Jaguar? And we haven't heard much from him through the session as he's currently P15 with a 1:16.4. Almost 1.5 tenths down from provisional pole, and he darts into the pits with only 2 minutes and 30 left to go in the session. Elite currently warming up his tires. Adam warming up his tires. And we can see Typos has actually been a bit slow on this lap by the looks of it. Maybe he struggled a little bit and didn't manage to set anything promising for himself. We can see Miesco has actually managed to promote himself up into P3 with a 1:15.5. And with 2 minutes left to go, Mitchell has decided to come out of the pits to set his final timed run. So it's never over just as yet. We can see Young Thug, on the other hand, currently on his out lap. And with only 2 minutes, and with less than 2 minutes, ooh, as both the Mercedes nearly came into contact there. It's a good thing that car was ghosted. But with less than 2 minutes left to go, it's up to anybody really who could take pole position here at Imola. It's been an exciting qualifying with us so far. Ella at the moment currently in P4 with a 1:15.5. has managed to avoid most of the traffic, but as we can see ahead of him, there is a McLaren and an Aston Martin right in front of him, so he's gonna have to hope he doesn't catch up to them. Bit squirrely through that exit, as unfortunately Big Bambino has retired from the session, and Ella is unfortunately roughly 200ths down on his on his fastest time. It's unfortunate because he doesn't really need that much, less than a tenth, to move up multiple positions. So, as we can see, BR4 now managing to set a 115.521 and getting ahead of his teammate. So both the Red Bulls currently P3 and P4, and Ella has unfortunately invalidated his lap time, and that's going to be the end of his run. But the next threat, actually, I want to see. Okay, it seems like Young Thug is currently struggling as well, roughly a tenth and a half down on his time. Oh, and Ella going straight off into the gravel there. So a lot of drivers actually struggling over here, as this is the third time we've seen a car spin off and go off in this exact same patch. Joe Royal roughly 2/10 up on his time. He is currently in P6 with a 115.5, and with how close P4, P2 to I want to say P8, P9 is, even the slightest bit of improvement could definitely jump you up a whole bunch of positions, as Joe Royal actually chooses to abandon his lap and drive straight into the wall there. And that's going to be the end of his run. It doesn't seem like Ella's going to be setting any lap times of himself. And the Young Thug comes across the line, sets a 115.425. And it's not good enough by the looks of it. Mitchell looks like he's going extremely slow on this occasion. Most likely has abandoned his fastest lap time. Meanwhile, Ella can't do anything. Adam, on the other hand, comes across the line. He can't improve too much. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't look like anybody's going to be taking pole position away from Mitchell. Unless Pyro or Jacko could maybe pull something out of their hats. Jacko, no, unfortunately, Jacko has invalidated his lap time. And it doesn't seem like Pyro is going any faster either. Ella has gone into the pits himself. And ladies and gentlemen, that will be the end of qualifying. So Mitchell manages to take pole position at Imola. Young Thug in the Haas currently sits in P2. BR4 and Miesco in the Red Bulls sit in P3 and P4 respectively. And Ella in the Mercedes sits in P5. And this shapes up the grid very, very nicely for what should be a very exciting race, as the clouds do get darker around the Imola circuit. This track is difficult enough as it is to deal with. Having some rain in the areas is going to make everything a lot more harder for everyone. You know, with how many people are spinning and having difficulties on this track, Booma, there's a very good chance you could pull a last to first here. Wouldn't that be exciting to see? With this midfield battle, oh, okay, never mind. I was gonna say the midfield battle is insane with how tight everybody was to each other, only separated by hundreds or even thousands of a second at times. Incredible stuff. Right then, ladies and gentlemen, we are all set to get the Imola Grand Prix underway. As we can see, all the garage mechanics T-posing in front of their respective garages. It's just a sign that we're all set and ready for battle here at the Italian circuit. 20 seconds left to go, and as we get this countdown underway, we'll ride on board with Mitchell, who will be leading the rest of the pack through the formation lap, and will be trying to pace himself along with everybody else. Hopefully he won't have to wait in the starting position for too long, but we'll have to see how fast he goes through it. This will also give us a great chance to review what tires everyone has put on. So while we have the chance, let's take a look. So Mitchell currently on the who's currently taking pole position is starting off on the hards. We can see Young Thug and the Haas on the mediums. BR4 and Miesco, general consensus of the Red Bull team seems to be the hard tires are the reliable choice to be on. Ella and P5 on the mediums. We can see Joe Royal on the hards. Staba and Adam on the mediums. Typos being the only driver on the grid currently in P9 who chose to put on the softs, and then Elite in the and Elite his teammate putting on the hards himself. So it's a general mix of between hards and mediums. We can see the front of the pack is more reliably choosing the hards, while the bottom end of the grid is going towards the medium choice. We can see the pit stop strategy there. Lap 14 of 19 is the predicted pit stop window for the medium tires. So regardless, let's keep our attention to Mitchell, who's leading the rest of the grid through the formation lap. Now, obviously, with the hards, he's gonna have to struggle. He's gonna struggle for grip there at the start of the as the lights go off. But assuming that he can get enough, his reaction times are good enough, which we know they are, as Mitchell violently moves left and right to heat up his tires. You know, absolutely, Young Thug is not going to let anything slip from his hands. He's going to try to jump Mitchell as soon as he gets the chance. And we can't forget about the Red Bull duo of BR4 and Miesco. It'll be interesting to see if these two get off the line perfectly nicely, and if there's going to be any team orders between the drivers. So everything to play for, tons of questions that we have, all to be answered very, very soon as the drivers perform their final grid burnouts to heat up their tires as much as possible. And as I say that, Mitchell has spun his car around. Not necessarily a good omen to the race, as we can see Adam performing his signature 360 spin and driving off into the grass. We can see how much towards the right Mitchell is pointing, definitely looking to cover off Young Thug as soon as he gets the chance. And with Booma in the final grid position, we've had a very, very intense and interesting qualifying session. No red lights just as yet. That's odd. Usually they'd pop up by now. I was getting ready to go for the lights out and away we go here, but unfortunately it just seems like everything is frozen and Pyro has left the session. Oh no. Oh, actually, never mind. We're all set to get the Grand Prix underway as Pyro has left the session. There's 5 red lights. It's lights out and away we go here at the Imola Grand Prix. We can see Mitchell has gotten off to a very nice start here, but Young Thug going side by side with him, heading into the next corner. Both drivers going side by side. We can see the Red Bull of BR4 getting very, very interested, heading into turn 1. And Young Thug around the outside makes the move stick on the Ferrari. We can see a few cars going off into the gravel there, but the battle is not done just as yet, as the Ferrari of Mitchell trying to fight back this position, but unfortunately he's going to have to tuck right back into the slipstream of the Haas and decides not to go and dive down the inside just as yet. We can see meanwhile in the back there the McLaren of Adam fighting alongside with the Mercedes of Ella, and the drivers going side by side around the outside. Adam trying to make the move stick, and he does manage to make it stick, promoting himself up into P5. And what a fast start that was to the beginning of this Grand Prix. Looking up the grid, we can see BR4 currently roughly 3 tenths behind, 2.5 tenths behind Mitchell, as we get this absolutely terrible camera angle looking at the action there. Looking down the grid, actually, we can see Unknown Elder getting past Pyro and promoting himself up into P14, as there seems to be a car, it seems to be Pyro, who has actually ghosted off, probably because he's disconnected from the session. And we can see now a bunch of cars making up their positions. Looking back up the grid, we can see that Adam is getting very close behind the Alpina Staba. We do have a yellow flag, and that does seem to be the Alpine of Pyro, but he seems to be back on the move, so it doesn't look like we'll be having any safety cars just as yet, as Young Thug sets the fastest lap time of the race, but that being because he is the first car to come across the line. Meanwhile, we can see Adam gaining on Staba, gaining, trying to make a dive around the outside. He's a bit too far back on this occasion and decides to back out of that move. And as I say that, Adam once again looking towards the inside line, trying to threaten Steva, just filling up his rearview mirrors, trying to force him into an error. We can see Joe Royal getting past. Oh, Miesco, and unfortunately has come into contact with the Red Bull driver, and Miesco has unfortunately spun out. After having a fantastic qualifying session, he's dropped down multiple positions and is now currently in P13, and possibly going to be dropping down even further. We can see Ella, on the other hand, 200ths of a second behind Adam. Obviously getting overtaken by the McLaren driver earlier on at the start of this race. Will be looking to fight for this position back as we get the predicted pit stop strategy once again. And I'm not too sure what happened there. It could have been just Ella missed his braking point completely as he massively drove over the curves there. Luckily, oh, and once again, Ella just constantly missing his braking point. So I'm not too sure if there's any bit of wing damage on his car. But he's definitely struggling to meet his braking points. And we can see Mitchell has already dropped off by 1.5 seconds to Young Thug. Meanwhile, BR4 500ths of a second behind him. And as lap 3 begins, we have now DRS will be enabled in this lap. So who's going to come out ahead? We can see Ella once again getting past Adam, but Adam not done with his moves. They're tucking right back into the slipstream of the Mercedes, but unfortunately a bit too far back on this occasion. As we look down the grid, we can see Buma currently in P10 right now. After starting from dead last, has made up a massive amount of positions. Has Jacko Lacko right in front of him, so he'll be looking to make that overtake move as soon as possible. It is lap 3 of 32. We have no safety cars just as yet. And as I say that, there is a yellow flag in Sector 1. It seems to be the AlphaTauri of Pyro. But he's back on the move again, so I don't think there's going to be any safety cars or VSCs at the moment. As this battle slowly simmers out, we have another yellow flag. Just Pyro constantly struggling. It seems like he's really having a tough time out there on the circuit. Currently, the closest battle on track at the moment seems to be between Typos and Jaguar, and this is for P12. No points to be gained from here, but this will be the climb up towards the points position, which is P10. But going back towards the front of the grid, we can see Ella getting very close behind Steba at this moment. DRS wide open, but with this DRS train, it'll just be that much harder to catch up to the driver in front of you. So he's once again going to have to just tuck himself right back into the slipstream and just be patient. Stable, on the other hand, has gained massive amounts of time to BR4, and now Mitchell is going to have to start to worry because he has no DRS in front of him. As there's a yellow flag in Sector 3, it seems to be the Aston Martin of Elite. Stable filling up the rear view mirrors of the Red Bull. It's hard enough to complete a lap around a track like this with how easy it is to lose the car, but to do it through dirty air with a car right behind you, and one we can see Steba has massively missed his braking point there, goes massively off the track. Hopefully he didn't get an invalidation from that. But heading through the DRS, heading towards the DRS zone once again, you're gonna have to wonder when will the cars start cracking, when will these overtakes start taking place. We can see Steba roughly roughly 3/10 behind BR4 on this occasion, and Ella right behind him. Ella seems to be gaining massively on Steba. Looks towards the outside line, both drivers going side by side with each other, heading into turn 1, but Ella decides to back out of it and let Steba retain P4 for the moment. And this battling is actually working out wonderfully for Mitchell, as it's allowing him to create a small gap, not a massive one, but a small one. As Steba's actually gone off the track there, may have missed his braking point, as we've seen him doing quite a bit there. He may be struggling to just meet his braking points for some reason. And Ella manages to promote himself up into P4 after taking advantage of Steba's mistake there. Steba obviously going off into the gravel there, so he's definitely going to have some dirt on his tires, which are going to take a little bit of time to clean up. But as I say that, he's right back on the rear wing of Ella already. Not wasting any time to maybe fight for this position right back. Oh, and now we can see Ella has gone off the track. A bunch of drivers missing out on their braking points as Joe Royal picks up the first 3-second time penalty of the session. So lap 5 of 32. Steba roughly 3.5 tenths behind Ella. But with DRS wide open, will he be able to gain and maybe make a possible overtake? It doesn't seem to be the case, as Ella also has his DRS open. And that's the whole problem with these DRS trains. We can see Typos on the other hand on the soft compounds of tires trying to make a move on Unknown Elder. Both drivers going side by side with each other. The Aston Martin and the Alpine. The Aston Martin kind of losing out on the top speed over there, and with that top speed advantage we can see the Alpine's able to retain that position. And we can see Typos actually really pushing that Alpine along. We gotta hope that there's no collision between the drivers heading into the fast chicane. And there isn't. We can see that Typos trying to get a better run through that corner, and he may have just done it as he looks towards driving around the outside of the Alpine, and both drivers now going side by side, and it doesn't seem like there's enough room for both drivers, as unfortunately they make contact, and the Alpine has it costed the Alpine dearly as he spun out, and Unknown Elder drops down into P14. Hopefully, I don't think he got any massive amounts of wing damage from that, so we'll see if he has to come into box from that. And we can see Miesco has now unfortunately picked up a 3-second time penalty, so the Red Bull driver definitely feeling the struggles early on in this race. Ooh, Steba getting a bit squirrely there. We're nowhere near the expected pit window for these drivers at the moment. We have a yellow flag in Sector 2, and it does seem to be the Alpine of Unknown Elder once again. So it could be that wing damage is coming back to haunt him at the moment. We can see, oh, Ultimate Beast has actually decided to come into the pits there on his 6-lap-old mediums. I'm not too sure if he's experienced any wing damage, but let's take a look. And he has, unfortunately, so that's going to be him dropping down a costly few positions, or a bit sooner than he would have liked. I thought there was a driver that spun out there, so I had to go check. And a driver that's been constantly involved in a lot of action at the moment is Typos, now roughly 4 tenths behind Booma, who was very close to Jaguar for a few minutes, but now has clearly dropped out from his DRS range. And speaking of dropping out from DRS range, we can see Ella is actually struggling to keep up with BR4 and now has fallen out of his DRS range. So how will this play out for BR4 as he progresses through the DRS zones? He's obviously going to have one less car to worry about and only has to focus on what's ahead of him. Meanwhile, Steva is going to have a great opportunity to catch up to Ella, assuming Ella can... Actually, never mind. It seems like Ella's been able to catch up right back to BR4 and get within his DRS once again. Adam's extremely close to Steva at the moment. Young Thug currently riding a race on his own at the moment, roughly 1.5 tenths ahead of Mitchell, but there was a red, I believe his red light was flashing, which does symbolize that he has less than 10% ERS already. As the drivers come through this corner, there is a yellow flag out on this part of the circuit, as the Alpine of Unknown Elder is unfortunately struggling as he gets disqualified from the session for going the wrong way. And that's going to be the end for Young Thugs, for Unknown Elder's race. As we look down the grid, we can see Stella actually catching up to Pyro at the moment. Both drivers going side by side now, and it looks like Stella's going to be able to make the move before the corner even starts. As there's a yellow flag in that corner, and it seems like Ultimate Beast has unfortunately spun out. So spins left and right, drivers struggling for grip. It's all to play for here. If you can manage to keep your nose clean and you can stay on track, who knows how many positions you might just gain due to the costly mistakes of others. Lap 8 of 32. Adam seems to be a bit closer on this occasion. We have another yellow flag in sector 1 and 2. Now Adam massively gaining on the Alpine in front of him, but unfortunately once again too far back. Oh, and Steva actually for some reason drove completely off the track there. He may have just gone on the gas a bit too quickly and lost control of his car. And that's going to cost him dearly as he drops down into P6 and now has Joe Royal to worry about, who manages to get past him before the corner even begins and manages to promote himself up into P6. So that costly mistake from Steva there dropped him down into P7. Adam promotes himself up into P5 now. And this is what I meant. If you can keep your nose clean for the majority of this race and you can just manage to keep yourself on track, who knows how many positions you could gain just because of the costly mistakes from others.
And despite Young Thug having less than 10% ERS, it doesn't seem like Mitchell's been able to catch him, but it could be Mitchell's just waiting for the right opportunity to use his ERS himself. Yellow flag in Sector 1 as there is another Red Bull that has spun off. It isn't BR4, so it must be Miesco. You can see Ty Boss on the soft tires has decided to come into the pits. 8-lap old are soft. What tires is he going to be moving to? Let's take a look over here as he comes towards this pit crew. The pit crew does seem to have the hard tires out. Okay, so Top Boss going from a soft to a hard strategy. I don't think his hards are going to last towards the end of the race, but he may be hoping for a potential safety car. And now that the action has died down a little, let's take a look at who has made up the most amount of positions actually. So we can see at the moment Jacko Lacko and Booma currently up, both drivers are currently up 8 positions as Staba picks up a 3-second time penalty. So Jacko Lacko and Booma currently have made up the most amount of positions with 8. We can see Jaguar currently in P9, who's sandwiched between both drivers, have made up 6 positions. Unfortunately, Miesco has lost out on the most positions, losing out on 12 positions at the moment. And lap 11 of 32, we do have this DRS train now, so I'm not going to be expecting too many overtakes as LL drives over the curves there and may have potentially picked up 8 track invalidation for it, as he once again goes over the curves. So I'm not too sure what's up with LL. He's been missing a lot of his braking points and has been really struggling out on track at the moment with making his braking points. I'm not too sure what's going on. I don't think he has front wing damage as it isn't really visible, but I could be completely wrong. Meanwhile, we can see Booma roughly 3.5 tenths behind Big Bambino. This is for the final points position of this race. And unfortunately, Miesco has left the session, so that's going to be the end of his race most likely. Fortunately, it doesn't look like he's retired out on it doesn't look like he was retired in the pits, so his ghost is definitely going to still be driving around regardless. Okay, let's look up at the front of the grid. We can see Joe Royal roughly 3.5, roughly now 5 tenths behind Adam, who actually doesn't have DRS in front of him. So Adam is now basically a sitting duck here as the Williams of Joe Royal catches up to Adam. You can see the flashing red light symbolizing he has less than 10% ERS. Both drivers going side by side with each other into turn 1 and 2. And it seems like Adam's been able to cover off that exit very, very nicely as he guards the position well and retains P5. But the move is not done yet. Joe Royal desperately just trying to force Adam into making some sort of mistake here. Obviously, Joe Royal does have his penalty to account for, and it seems like he's gotten a much better run out of this corner than the McLaren driver did. And now both drivers once again going side by side as there's a bit of contact between the drivers coming through this fast left-hander, and both drivers seemingly missing their braking points as both of them go off track. But regardless, it seems like Joe Royal is able to make that overtake stick and now has promoted himself up into P5. But driving over those curves there, that's going to cost him dearly as Adam now once again looking to attack and gets the move done through the chicane and manages to retake P5. But Joe not done just as yet. The Williams and the McLaren driver both going at it with each other at the moment, not letting each other breathe, it seems, by the looks of it. And now will Joe Royal once again dive down the inside? No, he will not. Decides to stay back at the moment. But heading through the next corner, he knows that he has the DRS right in front of him. So once again, DRS wide open as the Williams once again goes for round 2 against the McLaren. Who's going to come out ahead? We can see Young Thug has actually come into the pits on his 12-lap old mediums at the moment. And now, once again, Joe Royal with the DRS manages to make the move before the corner even begins and promotes himself up into P4. And now Adam is going to have to worry about Staba. And actually, as I say that, Staba has completely lost his car and driven straight into the wall there. Luckily for him, his tire didn't break off, otherwise he would have DNF'd, but that's going to be very frustrating for Staba. We can see Young Thug has actually managed to make the move stick, and we can see Stable now losing out on countless positions after his front wing has broken completely off. And Young Thug comes out of the pits in P11 and has moved on to the hard compounded tires. So what kind of chain reaction will this cause for the front of the pack? Will Ella pit? Will any of the medium drivers who are currently in the top 10 decide to pit? We will have to see. BR4 now roughly 4.5 tenths behind Mitchell. Both drivers are on the 12 lap old hard, so they definitely won't be pitting just as yet. They'll be most likely stretching these tires out for as long as possible. Meanwhile, Ella, the only driver in the top 3 who has the medium tires, has decided to come into the pits along with Adam. Will Jacko Lacko, his teammate, follow through? Is there going to be a double stack at McLaren? Let's take a look here. He is a bit far back on this occasion, and he decides not to double stack the cars. So McLaren driver is deciding not to double stack, and Jacko now continues for an extra lap. And as the pit stops take place and the grid order shifts around, we can see Jaguar trying to make a move on Jacko Lacko. Was very close on that occasion, but it was a bit too far back to make any sort of move stick. We can see Young Thug has now been promoted up into P8 after the drivers in front of him have decided to come into the pits. But let's bring our attention back towards the front of the pack. BR4, 4 tenths right now behind Mitchell. And Mitchell, after he had his compromised start at the start of this race, has actually driven a very nice race so far, hasn't made many mistakes, and has kept it relatively clean. Obviously, I don't want to apply the commentator's curse on him, but he seems to be going at a good pace. BR4 struggling to really catch up to him, but with DRS, he should have a good opportunity to. But we've seen in the past how Mitchell can handle drivers within his DRS before, as he manages his battery very, very nicely there. But with DRS wide open once again, 6 tenths separating BR4 and Mitchell at the moment. And BR4 is gaining massively as the gap from 6 tenths now drops down to roughly 3 tenths. But unfortunately, it's too far back. As we can see, Jacko now finally decides to come into the pits. This is a great pit stop by the McLaren team. And Young Thug now gets promoted up into P7. Buma currently still hasn't decided to pit, neither has Jaguar. They both have 14 lap old mediums. I'm not too sure if they're waiting for a safety car or some sort of incident, but they still haven't decided to come in as yet. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the lap, but Buma now up into P6 after starting from dead last, so very impressive from him. Meanwhile, the gap between Mitchell and BR4 currently, once again, roughly 600ths of a second. Or 6 tenths of a second. And we've seen this story before. It doesn't look like BR4 is going to be able to catch Mitchell once again, so he's once again just going to have to hide behind him throughout this lap unless Mitchell makes some sort of big mistake. And we can see Jaguar now coming into the pits, and meanwhile Buma most likely going to be following suit, I assume, and yes he is. Besides, 14 laps is more than enough for his medium tires and decides to call it quits. We are halfway through this race. Young Thug does manage to get promoted up into P5 now. It seems like almost every single driver has moved on to the hard compounded tires. Well, obviously other than the drivers who currently are still running their hard compounds from the start of this race. who would, as a matter of fact, be Mitchell, BR4, Joe Royal, and Big Bambino. Very good positioning for the Williams drivers, I've noticed. Currently sitting P3 and P4 respectively, as there's a yellow flag in Sector 2 and 3. Oh, and it seems to be Young Thug. Young Thug has completely lost his car and has gone off the track. He was currently net P1, but unfortunately, because of some sort of incident, has lost his car. Thankfully for him, he stays in P7 and hasn't lost out on too much. But you have to wonder if he's experienced any sort of wing damage. We can see Mitchell has now come into the pits. And now how will this play out? It doesn't seem like Mitchell's going to be overtaken by Young Thug on this occasion. And with that, Mitchell comes out in P4 on a fresh set of medium tires with no Haas behind him. That mistake from Young Thug costed him deeply, as he now currently sits in P7 and has made his job infinitely more difficult. So how will the Haas driver recover from this? It's unfortunate I didn't get a chance to catch what happened to him. But we can see Ella now trying to catch out the Ferrari on his cold set of tires. But obviously he has to remember that Mitchell does have the medium compounds, which are going to be are going to have a lot more grip. And there's been another incident out on track involving Jaguar and Jacko Lacko, currently P11 and P12 both drivers. And yellow flags left and right as we get Pyro now getting a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And it seemed like completely out of nowhere, as just as we got over the halfway point of this race, everything just hit the ceiling. Everything's just gone completely to shit. Now we can see BR4 coming into the pits and moving and switching over to the medium compounded tires. We can see Big Bambino most likely going to be following suit. BR4 actually opting to come out into the pits as well, but will he come out ahead of Mitchell? And Mitchell, we can see right behind him, currently on the more heated compounded tires. Now, who will come out in front? BR4 does manage to get the position, but BR4 will have those cold mediums, and we can see the Ferrari of Mitchell closing the gap massively to the Red Bull driver. The Bull driver is going side by side, and Mitchell managing to make the move stick before the corner even begins. And BR4 is going to have no other choice but to play it safe, otherwise he will spin his car around with how cold those tires can be. So Mitchell now gets promoted up into P1, into P2. 21 seconds currently behind Joe Royal, who still hasn't come into the pits just as yet. We see Young Thug, unfortunately, in P6 at the moment. That incident did cost him deeply. But with that mistake, it opens the door up for multiple other drivers now. So Joe Royal still not opting to come into the pits. It's lap 18 of 32, and Joe Royal has decided to stay out. Currently, the driver with the oldest tires out on track at the moment. 18 lap old are his hards. Looking down the grid, actually, we can see Jacko Lacko very close behind Big Bambino, with Jaguar right behind him as well. Steba, who was a key fighter in the start of this race, has unfortunately dropped down into P13 by the looks of it after he's had his struggles. And it seems like the fight for the final points position is definitely on. No driver giving up an inch, as we can see the Haas of Jaguar maybe looking towards making another move on Jacko Lacko. Both drivers were involved in an incident into turn 1 and 2. But luckily it seems like both of them managed to away from it scot-free. You have another yellow flag in sector 1, and that seems to be the Red Bull of Mieszko, who's unfortunately lost his car again. And we can see Jaguar very close behind Jacko, but can't make the move stick. Oh, Steba's actually completely lost his car around and retired from the session out on track. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have the first safety car of this race in lap 19 of 32. Unfortunately, Steba went on the gas a bit too quickly there and has lost his front wheel. Now, what will this mean for some of the drivers? Joe Royal obviously getting a free pit stop, essentially almost 21 seconds ahead of Mitchell on the hard compounded tires. Unfortunately, he is very far away from the pit window, but we'll have to see how this plays out for him. So lap 20 of 32, we have the first safety car of this race. And a bunch of drivers now opting to come into the pits. We can see Adam darting in, Typos darting in, Stell on his old tires on his 18 lap old tires diving in and moving on to the medium tire compound. We can see Ultimate Beast unfortunately getting a drive-through penalty for speeding under the safety car. At the current moment, Joe still leads ahead of Mitchell, and the grid order massively switches around. So Young Thug deciding to stay out on his 7-lap old hards. No reason to go into the pits for those. And a bunch of drivers that now moved on to a fresh compound of mediums. So what will this mean for the front of the grid? We obviously have Ella and Young Thug who are on the older set of hards. Joe Royal has yet to pit, and as I say that, he has come into the pit. So let's see if Mitchell can come out ahead of Joe Royal. So coming through the final two corners at this moment, let's see where Joe Royal is currently diving in towards his pit crew who are at the end of the grid. Mitchell obviously having to maintain safety car pace, won't be able to go as fast as he'd like to please, and it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. Actually, it may be very, very close as Mitchell desperately trying to come ahead of Joe Royal, who's going to come out in front, and it seems like Mitchell is going to get the position, and Joe Royal unfortunately drops down from P1 into P3. So with only a handful of laps more to go, that is not what Joe Royal would have been hoping for. He obviously would have hoped that he came out ahead of Mitchell, but luckily for him, he is on the fresher compound of mediums. So will that tire life be able to help him out and maybe make him assist him in getting past both Mitchell and BR4 at the moment? We can see the grid is very, very split apart at the moment, so there's definitely going to be a few laps behind the safety car. So while we have the safety car, let's take a look at a few more details. So at the moment, we can see Ultimate Beast has a drive-through penalty, Pyro with 5 seconds, Jaguar with 3, we can see Ella with 3, and Joe Royal himself, who is currently in P3, does have the 3-second time penalty. Meanwhile, if we look at position changes, we can see currently Buma still with the highest number of positions made currently at the moment, with 8 positions gained. And at the moment, other than the retired driver of Miesco, it seems like Elite has lost out 4 positions, which happens to be the most lost out by a driver. So a bunch of drivers now who have made 2 stops under the safety car as well. So almost every driver out on track at the moment on the medium tires, other than unfortunately Young Thug, who is on his 8-lap old hards. He's going to be extremely compromised at the safety car restart by the looks of it. Only 11 laps left to go in this race. As I say that now, it becomes only 10 laps left to go in this race. Time slipping away from the rest of the grid as there's only so much that they can do in the last few corners or in the last few laps. So for a bunch of these drivers, it's either now or never. Unfortunately, they're just going to have to stay patient for now as the safety car goes around for another lap. We can still see the grid is very, very much separated as the Ferrari of Buma is seemingly massively far away, is extremely far away from the front runner. So we most likely, I believe, will have I think we'll most likely have another lap behind the safety car. I doubt it's going to be coming in at the end of this lap. Unless it's like a super late call by the stewards. Yup, as the safety car comes through Sector 2, Race Control hasn't given us any updates of the safety car coming in at the end of this lap, so we'll definitely be having one more lap behind the safety car. As drivers, you can see, are weaving left and right, desperately trying to get as much temperature into their tires as possible. And never mind, actually, Race Control gives us an extremely late call, almost at the last 2 corners, that the safety car is coming in at the end of this lap, which is very surprising. So, regardless now, it's up to Mitchell to go at a time he deems best. We'll ride on board with him to get a better idea of when he decides to go. He's going to try to catch BR4 off guard and obviously create a gap to him as much as possible. It's a long run down into turn 1, so it's absolutely crucial he gets an absolutely lightning start ahead of BR4. Hasn't gone as yet, and now Mitchell has decided to go, and he hasn't really caught BR4 off guard too much. But meanwhile, BR4 has his own issues to worry about as Joe Royal getting very close behind the Red Bull driver, looking towards the inside line. Will Joe Royal be going side by side with BR4 on this occasion? Yes, he will. But BR4 braking super late, nearly driving into the rear spoiler of the Ferrari. But that line has compromised him heavily as BR4 has dropped down into P3 and Joe Royal gets promoted up into P2. And we can see Big Bambino and Young Thug now fighting together, and that exit has once again compromised them as Ella and Big Bambino now going side by side, and Ella around the outside trying to make the move stick. And he does manage to make, actually no, he doesn't manage to make the move stick, drops down back into P6. Young Thug currently after that safety car restart manages to get promoted up into P4. And we had a relatively clean safety car. There was a bit of a scary moment there as we thought BR4 might drive into the rear end of Mitchell, but thankfully he did manage to avoid that. Meanwhile, we can see Big Bambino getting close behind Young Thug, but a bit too far back. But Young Thug goes massively off the track there, possibly missing his braking point there. But he still manages to retain P4. Meanwhile, at the back of the grid, we can see Ella and Big Bambino now very close together. So after that safety car restart, Mitchell manages to retain P1 at the moment. Joe Royal promotes himself up into P2. BR4 demotes himself down into P3. And is there a possible overtake building up here? No, there isn't. Obviously, there's no DRS straight after the safety car, so drivers are going to have to be a bit patient or use their batteries. We see Joe Royal roughly 0.03 of a second behind Mitchell. So all these drivers so close together, but nobody is able to make a move just as yet. We can see there's a possible move being built between Typos and Adam, but nothing comes out of it as Adam goes massively off the track there, but still manages to retain his position. Roughly 8 laps left to go. It doesn't look like really anything's coming out of this battle at the moment. Meanwhile, Joe Royal 3.5 tenths behind Mitchell. Obviously no DRS. Well, DRS has been enabled, but there is no DRS on this straight specifically. And it seems like Mitchell is using every ounce of his battery to keep this position from Joe Royal, realizing how crucial it is to maintain position at this current stage. Meanwhile, we can see Big Bambino roughly 4 tenths behind Young Thug. But Big Bambino has bigger issues to worry about with Ella right behind him. And we can see the Mercedes driver possibly trying to force the Williams into a mistake. It doesn't look like it's working at the moment. We will have DRS the next time we go through the next DRS zone. So that's going to be interesting to see how the positions change around. Obviously, all these drivers are currently in a DRS train with each other. So it's hard to say if any driver will make up any positions at all. But the big thing to keep an eye on is Joe Royal, who is now 2.5 tenths behind Mitchell. And Joe Royal currently on those 4-lap healthier tires. And we can see he's possibly looking to make a move before this DRS zone even begins, but decides to stay back. Possibly a smarter move so he can get a better run into turn 1. And Joe Royal basically pushing the Ferrari along now with DRS wide open. Let's see how this goes for Mitchell. Unfortunately, he's a bit too close from Joe to maybe possibly defend this position as Joe looks towards the inside line to make a move against the Ferrari. This is for the lead of the race. Both drivers going side by side into turn 1. And Joe Royal trying to make the move around the outside. Still can't make the move stick as he's still side by side with Mitchell. And now he gets the move done and promotes himself up into P1 and Mitchell drops down into P2. There's some fantastic racing by the race leaders, and we can see Big Bambino's unfortunately spun out as I'm desperately trying to catch up to his car. As there is a broken wing out on track, and that may belong to one of the McLaren drivers by the looks of it. And yes, it is. It seems to be belonging to Adam, who is missing the front left plate of his front wing. And we can see the detrimental effects of that loss of downforce, as we can see Stell now getting past Adam and promoting himself up into P7. Joe Royal unfortunately getting another time penalty, as we can see Adam has dropped down massively now and gets overtaken by Buma, who around the outside manages to make the move stick through the chicane there. But actually it looks like Adam's actually gotten a pretty decent run heading into the next corner, as both the Ferrari and the McLaren going side by side with each other. And Adam once again gets the move done on Buma and promotes himself right back up into P9. But that front wing damage, how much is that going to compromise the McLaren? And as I say that, he drives straight into the gravel there. That's how much it's going to compromise him, unfortunately. And as we can see, a bunch of drivers now getting through. And this battle is actually becoming very, very interesting, as now there's almost 3 wide heading towards turn 1. And once again, Adam has somehow managed to come into a battle for retaining P9. Oh, and unfortunately loses out and drives straight off the grass there. Straight onto the gravel there. And unfortunately drops down into P12. And that's going to be the end of his run by the looks of it. He's most likely going to have to come into the pits at the end of this lap. Buma unfortunately did not capitalize from this issue and now is currently sitting in P11, but Elite in the Aston Martin is now sitting in P9. So what about Stell? 4 tenths separating him and Young Thug at the moment. Young Thug is on those 14 lap old hards, and unfortunately Young Thug once again spins out. So the nightmares for the Haas driver continue. It's very unfortunate. It seemed to be his debut race, and he was completely on track to win it. But unfortunately, Young Thug has once again lost his cars. Those 14 lap old hards not helping him out whatsoever. And the nightmares continue as he struggles for grip. And that's most likely going to be the end of his race, looking as there's only roughly 4 laps left to go. BR4 on the other hand trying to catch up to Mitchell, who's unfortunately dropped out of the DRS of Joe Royal. So the battle for the final podium position may not be done just as yet, as BR4 looks hungry in that Red Bull, desperately looking to make a possible move and overtake Mitchell. And Young Thug unfortunately retires from the race, and that's going to be the end of his run. It's very unfortunate. He had a brilliant start to this race and he had a brilliant stint up until he made his pit stop, but unfortunately after that it's all been downhill for him. But I think there's a lot that he could take away from this race and that he could learn from it as well. Yeah, poor Young Thug. My thoughts go out to him. Meanwhile, BR4 3.5 tenths behind Mitchell, heading towards the next DRS zone. Luckily for Mitchell, his red light doesn't seem to be flashing, so he seems to have enough ERS to possibly defend from this situation. But with those fresher compounded tires, only a lap older, only a lap fresher, seems like it's helping BR4 a lot more than you'd think. And with DRS wide open, he's now beginning to gain on the Ferrari, and he's gaining, and he's gaining, and now he's going to look towards diving around the outside, heading into turn 1. So both the Ferrari and the Red Bull now side by side, and now BR4 managing to make the overtake stick around the outside and manages to promote himself up into P2. Mitchell unfortunately drops down into P3. Lap 29 of 32, we can see Adam's nightmares continue as he spins out once again and unfortunately drops down into P13. But yes, lap 29 of 29 of 32, only 3 more laps to go in this race. Not much more time left for any spectacular moves, and we can see actually Mitchell getting past BR4 once again, who has seemed to have a bit of an incident of himself and has now dropped down into P4, and Ella out of nowhere gets promoted up into P3. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, the race is still definitely on, as BR4's mistake heavily costs him, and now he sits in P4. BR4 gonna win this, I'm not too sure if the timing of that message was exactly the best. Regardless, let's see if BR4 can maybe fight this position back and get P3 right back. So now Ella desperately defending from the Red Bull. And the Mercedes driver, as they approach his turn 1, has actually done pretty well job of maintaining his battery and manages to retain P3 for the moment. Doesn't seem to be a lot of action taking place in the last 2-3 laps of this race. Seems like the cars are now beginning to develop a bit of a gap towards each other. We can see there's a pretty tight midfield battle going on for P7 at the moment, involving Elite, Jacko, and Jaguar at the moment. All three drivers separated by not more than 2 seconds. We can see Jaguar roughly 2/10 right behind Jacko as Jacko goes off the track there. That compromises him heavily. We can see Jaguar unfortunately does have his time penalty to worry about. Oh, and it seems like he came into contact with the McLaren driver there, and that's going to cost them deeply as Buma completely out of nowhere steals the position from the drivers, and we can see the sportsmanship between Jaguar and Jacko as Jaguar lets Jacko right back through, realizing his mistake. And Buma actually just coming out of nowhere and capitalizing on that error from the drivers, currently now sitting in P8 after starting dead last, making up 10 positions from the start to the end of this race. So it's been a very fantastic race from him, but let's see if he's able to maintain that position for the rest of the last few laps, as he does have 2 cars right behind him and within DRS zone. Looking up the grid, we know BR4's mistake costed him, but he's almost dropped out within a second, and he has now dropped out within DRS range. And as I say that, he gets right back in it through only 1 corner, makes up roughly 0.5 of a second. Holy hell. I've been noticing Ella's been going off the track there and driving on the curbs quite frequently there. I'm not too sure if he's figured something out or whatever, but I don't think that should be legal. He's been completely ignoring track invalidations, or track limits essentially. But BR4 now roughly 0.5 behind Ella. DRS wide open, you can see the flashing red light of Ella, realizing he doesn't have much battery left. But as he catches up to him heading towards turn 1, he's a bit too far back possibly. And BR4 decides not to send it into the corner. But we've now begun the final lap of this race. So it's all up to Joe Royal now to make sure that he rides a completely clean lap and doesn't cost himself. We can see Mitchell on the other hand, currently in P2, roughly 3.7 seconds behind P1 at the moment. BR4 is going to have to hope for a miracle or a mistake from Ella if he's looking to get past him at this stage of the race. Obviously, there's no more DRS zones until the end of the race. So, hard to say if he's going to be able to make up any positions at the moment. And it doesn't look like he's really going to be able to catch up to Ella as they come through the chicane. But after all the chaos and after all the racing that we've had, it's been a fantastic race to watch, and I'm sure Joe Royal is going to be very, very satisfied with himself. He did manage to get past Mitchell completely cleanly as he comes across the line. Joe Royal wins the Imola Grand Prix. Mitchell is going to come across the line and finish in P2. Ella comes across the line, finishes in P3. Actually, Joe Royal with his penalty drops down into P2, so Mitchell ends up winning the race. So Joe Royal now finishes in P2. BR4 finishes in P3. Still comes across the line, finishes in P4. We can see Typos right behind him, currently finishing in P5. His Mercedes teammate Ella finishing in P6, Elite in P7, Buma in P8 after starting from dead last, Jacko finishing in P9, Jaguar finishing in P10. And what a fantastic race this has been. Unbelievable racing from all the drivers here. And it seemed like Joe Royal had his... I completely forgot about Joe Royal having his penalty. He came across the line, but unfortunately he couldn't win the race as Mitchell stayed within that deficit and managed to promote himself up into P1. Hello, hello,
Hello.
Mitchell. Congratulations on your
Hello.
race win, man.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I do not want to hear you complaining about you not liking a track ever again. You cannot tell me you do dislike this track and then go on to win the race. That's not fair.
I yeah no that's absolutely fair.
Yeah, it's kind of bullshit if
I
you ask me, but
I just I don't hate the track. I just hate the chicane, the final chicane.
mm,
I'm so slow. I have zero confidence. Meanwhile, Joe just gets every single lap just gains 3/10 there.
yeah, no, I completely understand. But it was overall a great race from both of you. I mean, you obviously had that. You obviously had to struggle there at the beginning of the race when I kept calling him Young Thug. It was Young Thug, but whatever, bro. I'll call him Young Thug still. Until Young Thug got past you at the start of the race, but then he obviously made a mistake and you managed to keep that position. But talk me through it, man. Any notable moments for you through that race? Any scary things or any scary moments you look back on or any incidents?
Um, just the two passes after the safety car restart. First, Joe, I defended a bit harder. He pushed me a little bit on the grass, but that's understandable in that corner.
Yeah.
And I just left P4 go. Like I was like, I'm still happy if I get second,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. And then he pinned it, so that was lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was unfortunate for BR4. He got past you very
Yeah, it
nicely,
is.
but then completely spun his car around. But
Yeah,
oh
I thought
well.
maybe I can get him back with DRS as well, but oh well.
Yeah, no, but oh well, it's okay. You did your best, man. Congratulations on your race win. A big
Thank
congratulations.
you.
You bounced back after not having, not by your standards, a good race last time out, but that's fine.
Hmm. No, that's true.
But I'll bring my attention to Joe. Joe, man, I thought you had that race in the bag, bro. I didn't realize you had a penalty when you came across the line. I genuinely thought you won the race. Talk me through it. How do you feel?
Um, any other league, and I win that race.
Yeah, you think so?
Any other league, I win that race.
Why is
Because
that?
two of my 6 warnings would 100% be removed.
Really, what happened there? Talk me through them.
Um, just the chicane at the top of the hill,
Mhm.
sideways, lost half a second to Adam. Come back on the track, see the track limits.
Are
Twice
you
that happened.
serious? While you were
Yeah.
sideways?
Basically,
Oh, you
like
lucky.
I was facing the wall rather than the direction of the track.
Lovely.
Hmm. Maybe it would be best if the stewards started looking at 3 second lap
Well,
invalidations.
make it. I knew they weren't going to look at it, for one, the stewards, and two, I haven't seen my race director. I left the race straight away because it's classic Imola. Drive, drive the
Yeah.
stint of my life at the end of that race.
No, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not a track everybody's a big fan of, but in the end, you
that
got
I
through it.
despise it.
Yeah, finishing P2, you can't complain in the end. It's like, I mean, it's
Where
no
did you
Mitchell where he
start?
comes in and complains about it and then wins the race, but
I
P2
didn't
is a
see
good
you
start.
for yeah, I didn't see you for whole the race, and then suddenly you're there.
No, he had a very good pit stop in between. That pit
Yeah, you
stop
had the
under the
safety
safety
car
car
with
completely
him, but
saved your race.
where were you before the safety car, Joe? Like before everyone pitted?
Mm, I was net P5 because Adam decided to be
No.
a little bit aggressive with his defence into
Yeah.
turn one, so I repaid the favour. Um,
Nice.
into Piratella, but he got me back straight away anyway because I lost the back end.
Alright,
Hard
well,
racing at the end of the day. But I definitely benefited from that. I knew straight away, I was like, 3 seconds. I'm not going to get a higher position. Let's
mhm.
just stay out and just see it as a safety car. Or I wanted the VSC, because
Yeah,
the
no,
VSC would have been
I honestly
far more
thought with the
beneficial.
3 seconds you would easily win it, because I already knew I didn't have to pace. But then I
Alright.
was very amazed how he took the chicane. I was like, wow, that's how you take the chicane. And I look at top, oh, 6 seconds. So that's how he not do it, I guess.
Yeah, that one I also don't think should have been a warning. I don't
Ah,
actually think
bro, you were fully on the curb there. I can't do that on my wheel. Well, I don't
I
have the
don't
wheel.
understand why I can do that, to
Wait,
be
Joe, do
perfectly
you race on
honest.
controller?
Yes, I'm on a controller.
That's crazy. Holy hell. Okay.
The thing is round here is I lose so much through sector one.
Yeah, yeah,
hmm
so.
I'm pretty sure Imola's a more controller-based track anyways, isn't it?
No, it's a wheel track.
It's,
100%
Really?
it's a
it's
wheel track.
just a couple corners, yeah.
The wheel track,
Like all
definitely.
the important corners are for wheel, then that is fair.
That's fair. All right, well, I won't hold you guys up too much. Congratulations on your podiums. You couldn't get BR4 in for an interview. He never joins anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Nah, he's always salty.
Right. Well, this has been fun. Once again, a big congratulations to you guys. We head down next week to Hungary for what should be an exciting race once again. I'm looking forward to a lot of safety cars on that track. But yes, that will be all for Tier 1. I hope you all enjoyed the stream as much as I did, and we will see you all next week.